Hey, tonight we're diving into one of the most demanding jobs in history, commanding a ship in the Royal Navy during the Age of Sail. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1800, appointed as the captain of a Royal Navy frigate during the height of the Napoleonic Wars. The good news is that you've achieved one of the most prestigious positions available to a gentleman of this era. The bad news: you may not survive your first day. The gentle rocking beneath you isn't the comfort of your modern bedroom. It's the constant movement of wooden planks as your ship rides the swells of the Atlantic. Your cabin at the stern of the vessel is the most spacious accommodation on board, but that's not saying much. The space is barely large enough for a small bed, a desk bolted to the floor, and a few storage chests containing your worldly possessions. A lantern swings gently from a hook in the ceiling, casting dancing shadows across your nautical charts and logbooks. You sit up, your head nearly brushing the low beams above. Unlike the cramped quarters where your crew sleeps in hammocks strung just inches apart, you at least have privacy. But privacy at sea comes with responsibility, crushing life or death responsibility for every soul aboard. A gentle knock at your door interrupts your thoughts. "Captain, sir," comes the voice of your steward. It's 5:30 bells in the morning watch. The officer of the watch sends his respects and reports fair winds from the southwest. You mumble an acknowledgement, still adjusting to the naval timekeeping system, where each day is divided into watches and time is counted by the striking of bells. 5 bells in the morning watch means it's 6:30 a.m. Early, but not by naval standards. Many of your crew have been awake since 4 a.m. Your personal steward enters with a basin of fresh water, a luxury on a wooden vessel where most men will go weeks without a proper wash. The water is slightly warm, another privilege of rank, heated by placing the metal basin near the galley stove. As you splash your face, you are aware that this small comfort marks the divide between you and your men. "Your uniform is pressed, sir," your steward says, laying out the elaborate blue coat with gold epaulets and buttons that marks you as a post-captain in His Majesty's Navy. The uniform didn't even exist until 1748, but now it's a source of tremendous pride and a significant expense from your own pocket. Everything about the outfit, from the white breeches to the bicorn hat, is designed to set you apart, to make you recognizable as the embodiment of naval authority. You dress carefully, knowing that appearance is part of the performance of command. Your crew must see in you something more than a man. You must be the living representation of discipline, confidence, and control. Any sign of weakness or uncertainty could undermine the delicate structure of authority that keeps nearly 300 men working together in this wooden world. "Breakfast is ready in your day cabin, sir," your steward informs you. "Cook's managed fresh eggs this morning." Another luxury, while your men break their fast on burgoo, a porridge of oatmeal boiled in water, or ship's biscuits softened in coffee made from burnt bread, you dine on eggs from the ship's small supply of chickens kept in coops on the deck. Your table is set with china plates and silver utensils, carried aboard at your own expense. The contrast between your dining arrangements and the crew's rough wooden trenchers couldn't be more stark. As you eat, your first lieutenant joins you to discuss the day's business. Unlike the common sailors who receive their pay months or years in arrears, you and your officers are gentlemen with means, or at least the appearance of means. Many lieutenants serve on half pay when not actively employed, struggling to maintain the lifestyle their position demands. "We should reach the blockade station by midday if this wind holds, sir," your first lieutenant informs you. The purser reports we're well provisioned for 3 months at sea, though the water in the forward casks is already starting to turn. Water, one of your most precious resources and constant concerns. Stored in wooden barrels, it quickly becomes stagnant and foul. Within weeks, your crew will be drinking water green with algae and teeming with tiny creatures visible to the naked eye. It's one reason the daily rum ration is so important. Mixed with water as grog, it makes the foul liquid somewhat palatable. "Very good, Mr. Harrison," you reply, adopting the formal tone expected of a captain addressing his officers. "I'll be on deck shortly." Stepping out of your cabin into the brightness of morning, you feel the immediate weight of every eye turning towards you. The quarterdeck, your domain, falls momentarily silent as the officer of the watch calls out, "Captain on deck." You acknowledge the salutes with a nod, careful to maintain the perfect balance of confidence and gravity. Too friendly and discipline suffers, too severe and morale plummets. The delicate art of command is your first and most important duty. The good news is that your ship is a powerful 38-gun frigate, sleek and fast compared to the lumbering ships of the line. The bad news is that you're responsible for every inch of her, from the condition of her sails to the cleanliness of her bilges. And unlike modern military commanders, you funded much of her fitting out from your own pockets. All hands to stations for setting sail," bellows the boatswain as you give the order to make way. The organised chaos that follows is a testament to the rigid hierarchy and training of your crew. Men scramble up the ratlines, the rope ladders leading to the yards high above the deck, with practised ease. Others haul on ropes thicker than a man's wrist, their muscles straining as canvas unfurls against the blue sky. You watch everything with a critical eye. A captain who doesn't understand every aspect of his vessel's operation is a liability. You need to know when the topmen are being sloppy in furling the royal sails, when the gun crews are taking too long to run out their cannon, when the helmsman is allowing the ship to fall off course by a few degrees. And all the while, you're calculating how much water is the ship consuming daily, how long will the salted beef last before it's too rancid even for the hardened stomachs of your crew, what's the rate of illness among your men, and how will that affect your ability to fight if you encounter an enemy vessel. The ship heels over slightly as the wind fills her sails, picking up speed. The sensation never fails to stir something in your soul. The pure exhilaration of harnessing nature's power through human ingenuity and coordinated effort. But you can't afford to be distracted by the romance of sailing. There's a Spanish merchantman on the horizon, and your duty is clear. As a captain in His Majesty's Navy during war with France and Spain, you're expected to capture enemy vessels. It's not just patriotic service, it's how you make your fortune. "Beat to quarters," you order, and the drummer boy's rhythmic tattooing sends men racing to battle stations. Gun crews assemble by their weapons. Powder monkeys, often boys as young as 10, prepare to run cartridges from the magazine, and marine sharpshooters climb to positions in the fighting tops. The good news is that prize money from captured vessels can make you wealthy beyond your dreams. The bad news is that you must risk your ship, your men, and your life to claim it. As your ship closes on the merchantman, you face your first true test of command. The Spanish vessel isn't striking her colours. Instead, gun ports are opening along her side. She's not a merchantman at all, but a disguised frigate with more guns than your own vessel. "Hard to starboard!" you shout, realizing you've been lured into a trap. "Ready the larboard battery!" The ship heels dramatically as the helmsman spins the wheel, changing course to bring your own guns to bear. Men grip whatever they can to stay upright as the deck tilts beneath them. In the controlled chaos that follows, you must project absolute calm and confidence, even as your mind races through calculations of wind, distance, and firepower. You've been at sea less than a day, and already you're fighting for your life. This is the reality of command in the age of sail. Constant vigilance, split-second decisions, and the weight of hundreds of lives resting on your judgment. Stand by, you call, waiting for the perfect moment when your guns will have the greatest effect. The timing is critical, fire too soon, and your shots will fall short or strike with minimal force. Wait too long, and you give the enemy the advantage of the first broadside. And this is just the first of countless decisions you'll make today. Decisions about navigation, about discipline, about the allocation of limited resources. You'll arbitrate disputes among your officers, inspect the ship for cleanliness and order, review the purser's accounts, and plan your course through enemy-patrolled waters. A captain in the Royal Navy isn't just a sailor. He's a commander, administrator, judge, navigator, tactician, and diplomat all rolled into one. The good news is that success in this role brings glory, wealth, and advancement. The bad news is that failure brings disgrace, court-martial, or death. As your gun crews stand ready, faces tense in anticipation of your command, you feel the full weight of authority settle on your shoulders. This moment, with lives hanging in the balance, is what separates those who can command from those who cannot. You take a deep breath, steady your voice, and prepare to give the order that will unleash hell. But the truth is, you wouldn't have made it this far. Long before you reached the captain's cabin, the brutal process of becoming a naval officer would have broken most modern people. Starting as a midshipman as young as 12 years old, you would have endured years of harsh discipline, dangerous conditions, and rigorous training. You would have learned to navigate by the stars, to identify dozens of types of knots and sails, to understand the complex mathematics of gunnery and ballistics. You would have developed the ability to sleep in short bursts, to eat whatever provisions were available, no matter how unappetizing, and to maintain your authority even when exhausted or ill. Take the extraordinary case of Thomas Cochrane, a Scottish naval captain whose exploits during the Napoleonic Wars became the stuff of legend. In 1800, Cochrane was given command of HMS Speedy, a tiny sloop with only 14 small cannons. Rather than viewing this as an insult or a limitation, Cochrane turned his seemingly insignificant vessel into a nightmare for French and Spanish shipping. In one particularly audacious action, Cochrane attacked the Spanish xebec frigate El Garmo, a vessel more than 3 times the size of Speedy, with more than 6 times the firepower. Rather than retreating from this mismatch, Cochrane employed brilliant deception, flying American colours to approach closely, then unleashing a devastating point-blank attack before boarding with his vastly outnumbered crew. How did he prepare his men for this seemingly suicidal assault? He ordered them to blacken their faces with soot to appear more terrifying. Psychological warfare in its most primitive form. The Spanish, confronted by these demonic-looking boarders and thrown into confusion when Cochrane ordered their colours struck down, surrendered a vessel that by all rights should have annihilated the tiny Speedy. In the space of 13 months commanding this single small vessel, Cochrane captured or destroyed 53 enemy ships, an almost inconceivable record of success that earned him the nickname Le Loup de Mer, the Sea Wolf, from Napoleon himself. But Cochrane's brilliance as a naval commander was matched by his inability to navigate the political waters of the Admiralty. His outspoken criticism of corruption and his fiercely independent nature made him powerful enemies among the naval establishment. So while his tactical genius couldn't be denied, his career suffered from his refusal to play the political games necessary for advancement. This, too, was part of being a captain in the age of sail, understanding that your success depended not just on your abilities at sea, but on your connections and conduct ashore. A captain without powerful patrons in the Admiralty might find himself without a command, regardless of his skills. The daily reality of command was far from the romantic image we often have of sailing ships. It meant constant vigilance against discipline problems, everything from minor infractions like untidy uniforms to serious crimes like theft or desertion. As captain, you were expected to maintain order through a system of punishments that would shock modern sensibilities. The most common disciplinary action was flogging, having a sailor whipped with a cat-o'-nine-tails before the assembled crew. As captain, you determined both the offences that warranted punishment and the number of lashes to be administered. Too lenient, and discipline might collapse; too harsh, and you risked breeding resentment or even mutiny. You were also responsible for the health of your crew in an era before modern medicine. Scurvy, caused by vitamin C deficiency, was a constant threat during long voyages. Smart captains like Lord Nelson insisted on providing citrus fruits and fresh vegetables whenever possible, understanding that the health of their men was directly connected to the fighting effectiveness of their ships. The living conditions aboard even the finest naval vessels were cramped and uncomfortable by modern standards. Your crew slept in hammocks slung so close together that they touched when occupied. Privacy was non-existent for ordinary sailors, who performed all their bodily functions in full view of their shipmates. Food was monotonous and often unappetizing. Salt beef so hard it had to be soaked overnight before cooking, ship's biscuit infested with weevils, peas, oatmeal and cheese, all washed down with beer or rum-laced water. As captain, you ate better. Fresh meat from livestock kept aboard, wines and spirits from your personal stores, perhaps even fresh bread baked in your own small oven. But these comforts came at a price, both literal, as you paid for them yourself, and figurative, as they further separated you from the men you commanded. A captain lived in a curious isolation, maintaining distance from both crew and officers to preserve the mystique of command. You dined alone or with invited guests, a practice that emphasized your unique position aboard ship. The psychological burden of command was perhaps the heaviest weight a captain carried. Every decision, from the course to steer to the discipline to impose, could have life or death consequences. A mistake in navigation could run the ship aground. An error in judgment during battle could lead to defeat and death. And unlike modern military commanders, you had no radio, no satellite communications, no way to consult with higher authorities. Once your ship left port, you were on your own, making decisions based on outdated orders and your own assessment of situations as they developed. This autonomy was both the greatest freedom and the greatest responsibility of naval command. Far from home waters, you represented not just the Navy but Britain itself. Your actions could start or prevent wars, strengthen or damage alliances, bring fortune or ruin to your nation's commerce. No wonder then that naval captains were selected and trained with such care, and that so many men aspired to this demanding role despite its hardships. Command of a king's ship was one of the few paths to glory and advancement available to men without great wealth or noble birth. The sun climbs higher in the sky as your ship and the Spanish frigate close to battle range. The wind fills your sails, the deck thrums with activity, and 300 men wait for your command to fight, to flee, or to try some clever ruse that might turn the tables on your more powerful opponent. This is the moment of truth, the crucible in which naval captains were forged. Some broke under the pressure, others discovered reservoirs of courage and cleverness they never knew they possessed. The great captains of the Age of Sail, men like Nelson, Cochrane and Pellew, seemed to thrive in these moments of crisis, their minds working with preternatural clarity, even as cannon fire shattered the air around them. Would you rise to the occasion, or would you falter? Would you earn the respect of your crew and the recognition of the Admiralty, or would you join the ranks of failed commanders whose careers ended in court-martial or obscurity? The honest answer is that most of us, raised in comfort, accustomed to immediate communication, unused to the brutal realities of the Age of Sail, wouldn't last a day as a naval captain in the 1800s. We lack the specific knowledge, the physical hardiness and the psychological fortitude that such command required. And perhaps that's why we find these stories so fascinating. They show us human beings operating at the very limits of endurance and ability, making life or death decisions with limited information, commanding not through technology but through character and presence. As the first shots ring out across the water, we leave you to ponder how you might have fared in that stern cabin, wearing that blue coat with its gold epaulets, carrying the awesome responsibility of command in the age of sail. Would you have been remembered as a Cochrane or a Nelson? Or would you, like so many others, have been broken by the immense demands of wooden ships and iron men? The Spanish frigate's broadside thunders across the water, sending plumes of white spray into the air as iron balls splash harmlessly just short of your vessel. You've gained a momentary advantage through your quick change of course, but the battle has only just begun. Your own guns remain silent, waiting for the optimal range. "Steady, lads," you call, your voice carrying across the tense quiet of your ship. "Hold your fire until we can see the whites of their eyes." As the distance closes, you can make out individual figures on the enemy deck, can see the gunners frantically reloading for a second volley. This is the reality of naval combat in the age of sail, a deadly game of manoeuvre where victory often goes not to the ship with more guns, but to the captain with superior tactics and nerve. Fire as you bear, you finally command, and your ship shudders as cannons roar in sequence, each gun firing as it comes to bear on the target rather than in a single broadside. The tactic, unusual but effective, catches the Spanish captain off guard. Instead of a simultaneous blast that might miss entirely, your sequential fire walks shots across his vessel, maximizing the chance of inflicting damage. The good news is that your first volley has struck true, tearing through the enemy's rigging and sending splinters flying across their deck. The bad news is that they've brought their bow around and are preparing to rake your ship stern to bow, potentially the most devastating attack in naval warfare. This dangerous dance of wooden vessels, each seeking advantage through position and timing, defined naval battles of the era. Victory depended not just on firepower, but on a captain's ability to outthink and outmaneuver his opponent, exactly the kind of brilliance that made Thomas Cochrane legendary. When Cochrane commanded the tiny HMS Speedy against the much larger El Gamo, he employed every trick of seamanship and psychology. After getting close enough to nullify the Spanish ship's advantage in gun range, he positioned his vessel so close alongside the larger ship that the Spanish guns couldn't depress enough to hit the Speedy's hull. Meanwhile, Cochrane's guns were elevated to sweep the Spanish deck with deadly fire. But it wasn't just his tactical brilliance that set Cochrane apart, it was his understanding of the human element in warfare. When his men boarded El Gamo, they faced a Spanish crew that outnumbered them nearly 6-1. Cochrane's solution: have someone cut down the Spanish colours, creating the impression among the enemy crew that their officers had surrendered. The psychological ploy worked brilliantly, throwing the Spanish into confusion and allowing Cochrane's vastly outnumbered force to secure the vessel. Such creative thinking was essential for naval commanders, especially those given smaller vessels like Cochrane. The Royal Navy, stretched thin by global commitments, couldn't always match enemy ships gun for gun. Victory often went to captains who could improvise, who understood that warfare was as much about morale and perception as about raw firepower. Your own tactical situation grows more desperate as the Spanish frigate manages to cross your stern, her guns now positioned to fire the dreaded raking broadside. You brace yourself, knowing that a single well-placed shot could travel the length of your vessel, potentially killing dozens of men and crippling your ship. The thunder of gunfire rolls across the water, and your world becomes smoke, splinters, and chaos. Men scream as iron tears through wood and flesh. A round shot smashes through your quarter gallery, showering your cabin with debris. Another strikes a gun carriage, sending it careening across the deck and crushing sailors beneath its weight. "Damage report!" you shout through the clearing smoke, your ears ringing from the concussion of nearby impacts. 3 guns dismounted on the starboard battery, reports your first lieutenant, his face streaked with powder smoke. 12 men down. Minor damage to the mainmast, but she's holding. We're still maneuverable, sir. The good news is that your ship has survived the raking fire without catastrophic damage. The bad news is that you're still outgunned and facing a larger opponent. Like Cochrane, you'll need to employ unconventional tactics to turn the tide. Hard to larboard, you order. Run out the starboard battery and prepare for close action. Marines to the fighting tops. Target their officers. The ship heels as the helmsman spins the wheel, bringing your vessel alongside the Spanish frigate at point-blank range. At this distance, even your smaller guns can tear through an enemy hull, and the accuracy of your marine sharpshooters in the fighting tops, platforms high on the masts, can sow chaos among the enemy command. This too was the reality of naval combat in the age of sail, brutally intimate. Unlike modern warfare conducted over horizons, captains in the 1800s fought close enough to see their opponents' faces, to hear their commands carried across the water. It was personal, in a way few modern conflicts are, with success or failure resting squarely on a captain's shoulders. The physical demands of combat were matched only by the mental strain of command. A captain couldn't simply issue orders and retreat to a protected command centre. You stood exposed on the quarterdeck, a visible target for enemy sharpshooters, maintaining calm and projecting confidence even as death flew around you. Many captains, including Nelson himself, bore the scars of this exposed position. Nelson famously lost an arm and an eye in separate engagements before finally falling to a French sharpshooter's bullet at Trafalgar. Yet tradition and practical necessity demanded that captains remain visible to their crews during battle, their very presence a rallying point for morale. Your Marines begin picking off Spanish officers, the crack of musket fire a counterpoint to the deeper boom of cannon. Your gun crews work with practiced efficiency, each man knowing his role in the complex choreography of loading and firing. It takes upwards of 8 men to operate a single cannon effectively, some to haul the massive gun back into firing position after recoil, others to swab out the barrel to prevent premature ignition, still others to load powder and shot. The pace is punishing. A well-trained gun crew might fire 3 rounds in 5 minutes, an eternity when facing an enemy broadside. The physical toll is enormous, with men straining against ropes and tackles, breathing acrid smoke, working in temperatures that soar as the action continues. Sweat-soaked and powder-stained, they keep to their rhythm, load, run out, fire, haul in, swab, and begin again. "Their captain's down," shouts an officer, spotting the confusion on the Spanish quarter deck through the drifting smoke. "They're losing cohesion." This was often the turning point in Age of Sail battles, not the destruction of a ship, but the shattering of its command structure. Without clear leadership, even the most powerful vessel could become vulnerable, like a chess match where taking the king ends the game. Naval captains often targeted their counterparts, knowing that removing the opposing commander could demoralize an entire crew. The Spanish frigate begins to drift, her manoeuvres becoming erratic as her chain of command fragments. You seize the opportunity, bringing your ship across her bow for your own raking fire. The devastating broadside tears through the length of the Spanish vessel, toppling her foremast and silencing several guns. "Prepare to board," you order, and your crew produces pistols, cutlasses, and boarding axes, the tools of close-quarter naval combat. Grappling hooks fly across the narrowing gap between vessels, pulling the ships together as men prepare to leap from one deck to another. The boarding action that follows is chaotic, brutal, and intensely personal. This isn't the clean, clinical warfare of button-pushing and distant explosions. It's men facing each other with edged weapons and primitive firearms, fighting hand-to-hand on blood-slicked decks. The sound is a hellish cacophony of screams, clash of steel, and sporadic pistol fire. You lead from the front, as expected of a captain in this era, your sword flashing as you direct your boarders toward key positions on the enemy vessel. The responsibility weighs on you with each step, not just for victory, but for the lives of your men who follow you into this maelstrom. Within minutes, the Spanish crew begins to falter, their resistance crumbling without coordinated leadership. Their first lieutenant, now in command after the captain's fall, finally strikes the colours, the naval signal of surrender. The ship is yours, a prize to be sailed back to a British port and converted to pounds sterling for you and your crew. This, too, was part of a naval captain's reality, the prize system that transformed warfare into a potential source of wealth. Under the rules of the era, captured enemy vessels became the property of their captors, with the proceeds from their sale divided according to rank. A captain might receive a substantial portion, as much as a quarter or even half of a prize's value, potentially earning more in a single successful action than in years of standard naval pay. The good news is that prize money could make a successful captain wealthy beyond his regular means. The bad news is that the system encouraged risk-taking that sometimes bordered on recklessness, as captains sought captures that would fill their purses as well as advance their nation's cause. Cochrane himself became famous not just for his tactical brilliance, but for his success as a prize taker. During his command of HMS Speedy, the small vessel's captures were valued at over $75,000, an astonishing sum equivalent to millions in today's currency. This wealth, combined with his noble background as the son of the Earl of Dundonald, should have secured Cochrane's place in naval society. Yet Cochrane's story illustrates another reality of naval command in the 1800s, the importance of politics and patronage. Despite his battlefield successes, Cochrane made powerful enemies through his outspoken criticism of corruption in the Navy and his unwillingness to play the political games of the Admiralty. His revolutionary tactics and independent streak, while effective in combat, marked him as a difficult subordinate. This tension between merit and connection defined many naval careers. Some of the era's finest captains languished without commands because they lacked powerful patrons, while less capable officers advanced through family connections or political favour. The system produced both meritocratic heroes and privileged incompetents, sometimes placing men in positions of command for which they were woefully unprepared. With the Spanish frigate secured, your attention turns to the practical matters that follow victory. Prize crews must be assembled to sail the captured vessel to port. Prisoners must be secured and treated according to the surprisingly civilized rules of naval warfare. Damages to your own ship must be assessed and repaired as best they can be at sea. And there's the human cost to account for. Your dead to be sewn into hammocks weighted with shot for burial at sea, your wounded to be tended in the ship's cramped and primitive sickbay. As captain, you must write letters to the families of those lost, a duty that weighs perhaps more heavily than any other aspect of command. The ship's surgeon works below decks, his instruments crude by modern standards, bone saws, probes, forceps, all employed without anaesthesia beyond rum or brandy. Amputations are common, performed quickly to prevent death from infection, with the severed limbs unceremoniously tossed through open gun ports into the sea. Even in victory, a captain faces difficult decisions. The prize ship requires a crew to sail her to port, meaning you must divide your own manpower. Too many men transferred to the prize leaves your vessel understaffed. Too few risks losing the valuable capture to recapture or the elements. There's also the question of the prisoners, officers traditionally paroled on their word of honour not to escape, common sailors confined in whatever secure space can be found. The articles of war and traditions of naval combat dictate humane treatment, but practicalities often intervene when dealing with dozens or even hundreds of captives on vessels already cramped with their own crews. "We've taken 23 prisoners, sir," reports your first lieutenant, including 2 officers. The Spanish surgeon is tending their wounded alongside our own. This cooperation between opposing medical personnel was a civilized aspect of naval warfare. Surgeons treated the wounded regardless of nationality and were generally considered non-combatants by both sides. Very good, you reply. Have our carpenter assess the prize for seaworthiness. If she can be sailed to Gibraltar, I'll assign Lieutenant Murray and 20 men to bring her in. This decision, splitting your crew, carries significant risk. Your own ship will be undermanned, potentially vulnerable if you encounter another enemy vessel, but the prize money from a frigate could make the difference between a life of modest naval service and one of financial independence, both for you and your men. Beyond the immediate tactical concerns, you face the strategic question of your next move. Your orders from the Admiralty, delivered before you left port weeks ago, instructed you to disrupt enemy shipping along the Spanish coast. With one significant victory achieved, do you continue your patrol or escort your valuable prize to safety? Unlike modern commanders with instant communication to headquarters, you must make this decision alone, weighing the national interest against the welfare of your crew and the security of your capture. This autonomy, the famous captain's discretion, was both a burden and a freedom for naval officers of the era. Cochrane's own career demonstrated the double-edged nature of this independence. His aggressive interpretation of orders led to spectacular successes that advanced British interests, yet also contributed to his conflicts with superior officers who preferred more cautious approaches. When he later served Chile and Brazil in their independence struggles, his tactical brilliance was matched by a willingness to take strategic initiatives that sometimes exceeded his formal authority. As the sun begins to set, bathing the aftermath of battle in golden light, you make your decision. The prize will be sailed to Gibraltar under a skeleton crew, while your own ship continues its mission along the coast. It's a calculated risk, but one in keeping with the bold spirit of the Royal Navy in this era. The evening brings a tradition observed across the fleet, the serving of the daily rum ration. Each sailor receives his tot, 1/8 of a pint of rum, often diluted with water to create grog. The ritual dates back to 1655 and would continue until 1970, a constant through centuries of naval evolution. For many sailors, this moment, marked by the boatswain's call and the cry of "up spirits," was the highlight of the day, a brief respite from the monotony and hardship of naval life. As captain, you're not part of this communal ritual. You have your own supply of spirits in your cabin, another marker of the separation between you and your crew. This separation extended to almost every aspect of shipboard life. While your men ate at mess tables, often sitting on the deck itself, you dined at a proper table in your cabin, served by your steward on china rather than wooden trenchers. Your food, while based on the same naval provisions, was supplemented by private stores, wines, preserves, perhaps even fresh bread baked in your own small oven. Even your relationship with time differed from your crews. Ordinary sailors structured their days around watches, 4-hour periods of duty followed by 4 hours off, a system that prevented any consistent sleep schedule. As captain, you stood no regular watch, instead remaining on call at all hours but able to rest when circumstances permitted. In your cabin that evening, reviewing reports and planning the next day's operations by the light of a swinging lantern, you embody the curious isolation of command, though surrounded by hundreds of men in a wooden world that barely stretches 100 yards from stem to stern. You are fundamentally alone with your decisions and their consequences. This solitude was perhaps the most challenging aspect of command for many naval captains. Even relationships with officers were necessarily limited by the requirements of discipline and the need to maintain the mystique of authority. The captain, who became too familiar with his lieutenants, risked undermining the very hierarchy that kept the ship functioning. Some captains compensated with pets, cats to control the ship's rat population or dogs for companionship. Others developed eccentric habits or interests to fill the lonely hours. Nelson was known for his detailed journals and correspondence. Others became amateur naturalists, artists, or writers during long voyages. Cochrane himself was notable for his technical interests, constantly experimenting with innovations in naval warfare. He was an early advocate for the use of rockets and chemical weapons, what he called stink vessels, and later in life would help pioneer steam propulsion. This inventive spirit, coupled with his tactical creativity, made him both an effective commander and a difficult subordinate in a navy that often resisted change. As you prepare for sleep in your narrow cot, the ship rocks gently beneath you, the sounds of the night watch moving quietly above. Tomorrow brings new challenges, navigating unfamiliar coastlines, managing dwindling supplies, maintaining discipline among men who have just tasted victory and the promise of prize money. The good news is that you've proven yourself capable of command under fire, winning a significant victory against a superior force. The bad news is that the demands of leadership never cease. Every day brings new decisions, new risks, and the constant weight of responsibility for lives and mission. This was the reality of naval command in the Age of Sail, a curious mixture of absolute authority and crushing responsibility, of potential glory and constant peril. It required a unique combination of technical skill, physical courage, and psychological resilience that few possessed in full measure. Captains like Thomas Cochrane became legends not just for their victories, but for embodying this rare combination of qualities. When Cochrane took HMS Speedy against El Gamo, a vessel with more than 6 times his firepower, he demonstrated not just courage, but the kind of calculated audacity that defined the greatest commanders of the era. The victory nearly didn't happen. When Speedy first encountered El Gamo, Cochrane recognized the danger immediately. Rather than engage in a hopeless conventional battle, he employed a brilliant deception. Hoisting an American flag, he approached as if a neutral vessel, buying time until he was close enough to strike effectively. When the inevitable battle began, Cochrane positioned his tiny vessel in the larger ship's blind spot, too close for the Spanish guns to depress enough to hit Speedy's hull. This wasn't just clever, it was a demonstration of absolute mastery of naval tactics and the physical capabilities of wooden warships. The boarding action that followed showed Cochrane's understanding of psychology in warfare. With his men outnumbered more than 5 to 1, he had them blacken their faces with gunpowder to appear more terrifying, an early form of psychological warfare. Then, in the midst of the chaotic hand-to-hand fighting, he ordered the Spanish colours struck down, creating confusion among the defenders about whether their officers had surrendered. These tactics, innovative, unconventional, and brilliantly executed, exemplified what made certain captains legendary while others remained merely competent. Cochrane's willingness to discard convention when necessary, to improvise solutions to seemingly impossible problems, set him apart even in an era of exceptional naval leadership. Yet his story also illustrates the limits of brilliance without political acumen. Despite his battlefield successes, Cochrane's career in the Royal Navy was repeatedly hampered by conflicts with authority. His outspoken criticism of corruption, his refusal to follow orders he considered foolish, and his independent streak made him enemies in an institution that valued conformity alongside competence. This tension between the need for initiative in combat and obedience in the chain of command defined many naval careers. The ideal captain was expected to show daring and independence when facing the enemy, yet perfect submission to often outdated or impractical orders from superiors hundreds of miles away. Dawn breaks with the cry of "Sail ho!" from the masthead, jerking you from a fitful sleep. You've barely rested 4 hours, but the demands of command allow little consideration for personal comfort. Within minutes, you're on deck, spyglass trained on the horizon where a smudge of white indicates another vessel. "What do you make of her, Mr. Farrow?" you ask the officer of the watch. "Appears to be a brig, sir, Spanish by the cut of her jib, running close to the wind." Another potential prize, but also another decision. Your ship is already undermanned after detaching a crew to sail yesterday's capture to Gibraltar. Engaging this new vessel means stretching your resources even thinner, potentially compromising your ability to handle your frigate effectively. This was the constant calculus of command in the age of sail, balancing opportunity against capability, weighing the mission against the practical limitations of men and material. Even the most aggressive captains had to recognize when their ships and crews had reached their limits. We'll shadow her for now, you decide. If she runs for a Spanish port, we'll intercept. Otherwise, let her think we haven't spotted her. Strategic patience was as important as tactical aggression for successful captains. Cochrane himself was known for careful observation before striking with overwhelming surprise, using deception and misdirection to create opportunities. Your ship settles into pursuit mode, maintaining distance while keeping the Spanish brig in sight. Below decks, the rhythms of naval life continue. Watches change, meals are served, and the never-ending work of maintaining a wooden vessel at sea occupies every available hand. The operation of a warship in the age of sail required constant attention. Unlike modern vessels with their mechanical systems and automated controls, everything aboard your ship depends on human muscle and skill. Sails must be trimmed constantly to account for changing winds. The hull requires regular inspection for leaks and damage. Rigging stretches and chafes, needing continuous adjustment and repair. "Captain, sir," your sailing master approaches, doffing his hat respectfully. "With your permission, I'd like to exercise the men at the pumps this morning." This mundane request highlights another constant concern: keeping the ship dry. All wooden vessels leak to some degree, with the gaps between planks opening slightly as the ship works in heavy seas. The bilge pumps, operated by teams of men working in shifts, are all that stand between your command and a slow, inexorable sinking. "Very good, Mr. Stevens. Carry on." As he moves off to organise the pump crews, you turn your attention to another vital aspect of command: navigation. Without GPS, radar, or even reliable charts, plotting a course through often hostile waters demanded extraordinary skill and constant attention. Your primary tools are the compass, sextant, chronometer, and lead line. With these simple instruments, supplemented by experience and dead reckoning, you must determine your position and chart a course that avoids hazards while intercepting your target. The margin for error is slim. A miscalculation of just a few degrees when setting course could mean missing a rendezvous or running aground on an uncharted shoal. The loss of HMS Association and 3 other ships of Admiral Shovel's fleet in 1707, with over 1,400 men drowned due to navigational errors, stands as a grim reminder of what can happen when a vessel's position is misjudged. This navigational challenge was one that Cochrane mastered exceptionally well. His ability to manoeuvre precisely in unfamiliar and dangerous waters gave him tactical advantages that other captains couldn't match. When commanding HMS Pallas off the French coast in 1806, he repeatedly used his superior knowledge of local waters to ambush French vessels in their own territory, capturing multiple ships in daring raids up the Gironde estuary. By midday, the weather is changing. Dark clouds gather on the horizon, and the sea takes on the leaden hue that experienced sailors recognize as a warning. A storm is brewing, another test of your capabilities as a commander. "Mr. Harrison, we've weather coming in," you inform your first lieutenant. "Make all secure for heavy seas, and have the watch stand by to reef topsails." Storms presented multiple threats to sailing ships, not just the obvious dangers of high waves and powerful winds, but also the risk of collision in reduced visibility, the strain on masts and rigging that could lead to catastrophic failures, and the challenge of maintaining course when landmarks and celestial navigation became impossible. As captain, your decisions in the face of approaching weather could mean the difference between riding out the storm safely and losing your vessel. Carry too much sail and you risk having masts snapped like twigs by sudden gusts. Reduce canvas too drastically and you might lose maneuverability precisely when you need it most. The good news is that your training and experience have prepared you for these challenges. The bad news is that nature remains unpredictable and unforgiving of errors. "The Spanish brig is altering course, sir," reports your officer of the watch. "Appears to be running for shelter in that bay ahead. This presents both opportunity and risk. Following the brig into an unfamiliar bay might allow you to capture her as she seeks refuge from the storm. However, entering unknown waters with a gale approaching could easily result in your ship being driven onto rocks or shoals." "Mr. Stevens, what's your assessment of that bay?" you ask your sailing master, the officer responsible for navigation. "Uncharted in detail, sir," he replies cautiously. "The general charts show it as relatively open, but there could be hidden dangers. With the wind shifting, we might find ourselves trapped if we venture too far in." Another decision with incomplete information. The daily reality of command in the age of sail. Modern captains have radar to detect obstacles, depth sounders to warn of shoaling water, and engines to power their vessels away from danger. You have only your judgment and the wind. "We'll follow her in, but maintain distance from shore," you decide. Have leadsmen in the chains taking soundings continuously. The leadsmen, sailors responsible for measuring depth by casting weighted lines marked with depth indicators, become your eyes beneath the waves, calling out depths as your ship enters the bay. Their practiced voices rise above the increasing wind. By the mark 5, indicating 5 fathoms, 30 feet of water beneath your keel. The Spanish brig ahead is clearly struggling with the deteriorating conditions, her crew scrambling to reduce sail as the wind strengthens. Your own ship, better handled and with a more experienced crew, maintains control more effectively, closing the distance between you. This was another element that separated great captains from merely adequate ones, the ability to operate effectively in adverse conditions. Nelson's victory at Copenhagen came in part from his willingness to navigate dangerous shallow waters that the Danes believed would protect their fleet. Cochrane repeatedly used bad weather to his advantage, attacking when enemies least expected it. As your ship draws closer to the Spanish vessel, now clearly visible through sheets of rain, you see confusion on her deck. Her captain, less experienced or simply overwhelmed by the combination of weather and pursuit, has allowed his vessel to drift dangerously close to the leeward shore, the direction toward which the wind is blowing. "She's embayed, sir," your first lieutenant observes grimly. "If her captain doesn't wear ship soon, he'll be on the rocks." Being embayed was a terrifying situation for any sailing vessel, caught between an approaching storm and a lee shore with limited options for escape. The Spanish brig's captain now faces an impossible choice: risk capsizing by turning directly into the wind to escape the bay, or continue on his current course and almost certainly be driven aground. Even as you watch, planning how best to capture the vessel, the moral dimension of command intrudes. These are enemies according to the declarations of kings and parliaments, yet also fellow sailors facing imminent destruction. "Signal them to surrender," you order. "If they strike their colours, we can attempt to assist before they're lost." This combination of military objective and humanitarian consideration characterised the best naval officers of the era. While their primary duty was to defeat enemies, there existed an unwritten code among seafarers, a recognition that all who sailed faced common dangers that transcended national enmities. Cochrane himself demonstrated this dual nature throughout his career. Ferocious in combat, he nevertheless showed remarkable concern for both his own men and defeated enemies. After capturing the Spanish Xebec El Gamo in his famous action aboard HMS Speedy, he paroled many of the captured Spanish sailors rather than confining them in the cramped hold of his tiny vessel, an act of both practicality and humanity. The signal flags rise up your mast, visible even through the increasingly heavy rain, a demand for surrender that's also an offer of salvation. For tense minutes, there's no response from the Spanish brig. Then, as she heels dramatically in a strong gust, her colours come down. "They've struck, sir," confirms your signals midshipman. "Bring us alongside to windward," you order. "We'll try to take off her crew before she grounds." This rescue operation in deteriorating conditions presents yet another test of seamanship and command. Bringing your frigate close enough to the brig to transfer personnel without colliding or running aground yourself requires precise ship handling and nerves of steel. The operation that follows is a testament to the skill and discipline of your crew. Small boats are impossibly dangerous in such conditions, so you must bring the ships almost touching, near enough for men to jump across the gap, yet not so close that the vessels damage each other in the rising seas. "Stand by to receive survivors," you call, as your ship edges carefully alongside the wallowing brig. "Mr. Murray, take charge of the transfer, priority to any wounded." Spanish sailors begin making the perilous leap across open water to your deck, fear of drowning temporarily, overcoming any concern about becoming prisoners. Their captain comes last, tradition demanding he remain until his men are safe. As he steps onto your quarterdeck, soaked and dejected, he offers his sword in formal surrender. This ritual, observed even in the midst of a howling storm, speaks to the curious mixture of civilization and brutality that characterized naval warfare in the age of sail. "Your ship is lost, sir, but your men are saved," you tell him in halting Spanish, declining to take his sword, a gesture of respect for an opponent who has surrendered honorably. The Spanish captain nods grimly, looking back to where his vessel is now visibly drifting toward the rocky shore. Within the hour, the brig strikes ground with a sickening crunch audible even above the storm. The waves quickly begin breaking her apart, a stark reminder of how quickly a proud vessel can be reduced to splinters. With nearly 60 Spanish prisoners now aboard, your ship faces new challenges. Space aboard naval vessels was already critically limited, with crews packed into every available corner. The addition of prisoners stretches resources to the breaking point. "We'll have to put them on short rations, sir," your purser advises. "Our provisions were calculated for our own complement, not 60 additional mouths." Food and water were constant concerns for naval commanders, especially when far from friendly ports. Your ship carries enough provisions for months at sea, but only if carefully managed. The naval ration was substantial by the standards of the time, roughly 5,000 calories daily for each man, but consisted largely of salt meat, ship's biscuit, dried peas, oatmeal, and cheese. The most precious commodity was fresh water, stored in wooden casks that gradually allowed the contents to become stagnant and foul-tasting. A typical sailor's allowance was 1 gallon daily for all purposes, drinking, cooking, and the minimal washing that naval life permitted. Reduce our own men's rations by 1/6, you decide. The prisoners will receive 2/3 of standard allowance. That should see us to Gibraltar. This decision, like so many in command, balances competing obligations to your own crew, to your prisoners under the customs of war, and to your mission. Too generous with the Spanish sailors, and you risk weakening your own men or extending your crews beyond sustainable limits. Too harsh, and you violate both humanitarian principles and the professional standards of naval service. Cochrane faced similar dilemmas throughout his career, particularly during his service in South America, where logistics were often stretched to the breaking point. His solution typically combined pragmatism with principle, treating prisoners firmly but fairly, maintaining discipline without unnecessary harshness. The storm continues through the night, testing both ship and crew. You remain on deck for hours, moving between stations, offering encouragement where needed and correction where required. This visible presence is essential to leadership in crisis. The captain who retreats to his cabin during danger quickly loses the confidence of his men. By morning, the weather has moderated, though heavy seas still make movement around the ship challenging. You've had no sleep, sustaining yourself with occasional cups of coffee brought by your steward. This physical endurance was another requirement of command, the ability to function effectively despite exhaustion, discomfort, and stress. Mr. Harrison, you address your first lieutenant as dawn breaks. I'm going to rest for an hour. Maintain course for Gibraltar and call me immediately if anything changes. Aye, sir, he responds, understanding both the explicit order and the implicit trust it represents. This delegation, knowing when to rest and recover while placing temporary authority in subordinates' hands, was yet another skill that separated effective captains from those who burn themselves out through misplaced dedication. In your cabin, you collapse fully clothed onto your cot, your mind still processing information even as your body demands rest. Sleep comes instantly but lightly, part of your consciousness remaining alert for the call that might indicate new danger or opportunity. This was the reality of command in the age of sail, not just the dramatic moments of battle and crisis, but the constant grinding responsibility that allowed no true respite. Even in sleep, a captain remained accountable for his ship and everyone aboard her. Your hour of rest ends with a gentle knock at the door. Your steward, not the urgent summons that would indicate emergency. You rise, splash water on your face from the basin, and straighten your uniform before returning to deck. All quiet, sir, reports your first lieutenant. Winds backing to the southwest, seas moderating. We should make good progress toward Gibraltar. Very good. Have the prisoners been fed? Yes, sir. The Spanish officers are in the wardroom under guard. Their men are confined to the forward hold, brought up in small groups for air and exercise. This arrangement, separating officers from ordinary seamen, reflected the rigid class distinctions of the era. Even in captivity, the hierarchies of rank and social position remained in force, with officers accorded privileges denied to common sailors. As your ship continues its journey toward Gibraltar, you turn your attention to another vital aspect of command, the health of your crew. The ship's surgeon approaches with his daily report, a litany of injuries, illnesses, and concerns that require your awareness, if not always your direct intervention. We've 3 men down with fever, sir, he reports. Nothing serious yet, but I'm watching them closely. 5 injuries from yesterday's action and the storm. 1 serious, a broken arm when Williams was thrown against a gun carriage. I've set it, but he won't be fit for duty for weeks. Disease was a greater threat to naval crews than enemy action, with scurvy, typhus, and various fevers claiming far more lives than cannon fire or cutlass. A captain's attention to hygiene, ventilation, and diet could make the difference between a healthy crew and one decimated by illness. Cochrane was particularly attentive to these concerns, recognizing that his small crews couldn't afford the losses that larger ships might absorb. He insisted on cleanliness, ventilation of the lower decks, and supplementing naval rations with fresh food whenever possible. His ships consistently maintained better health records than their contemporaries, contributing to their superior fighting effectiveness. Continue monitoring the fever cases, you instruct. If there's any sign of contagion spreading, we'll need to isolate them and have the deck washed down with vinegar today. The air below is getting foul. Vinegar was a common disinfectant in naval practice. Its acidic properties believed to combat bad air or miasmas thought to cause disease. While the germ theory of disease was still decades away, practical experience had taught naval officers certain measures that helped contain outbreaks. By midday, another vessel appears on the horizon, this time flying British colours. As it draws closer, you identify it as HMS Thunderer, a 74-gun ship of the line assigned to the Mediterranean Fleet. Signal our number and recent action, you order. The flags rise, informing the approaching warship of your identity and that you've engaged enemy vessels. This encounter highlights the isolation of naval command in the era. For days or even weeks, your ship might operate completely independently, with no communication with higher authority or other friendly vessels. Then, suddenly, you might encounter a senior officer who could approve or countermand your decisions, promote or relieve you, praise or condemn your actions. Cochrane experienced this uncertainty repeatedly throughout his career. His aggressive actions often yielded spectacular results, but sometimes exceeded his formal orders, leaving him vulnerable to criticism from more conservative superiors. After his brilliant capture of El Gamo in HMS Speedy, he was warmly commended, but after disagreements about tactics during the Battle of Basque Roads in 1809, he faced professional ostracism despite objective success. A boat puts out from HMS Thunderer, bringing a lieutenant to your ship with messages and, potentially, new orders. You receive him on the quarterdeck with proper ceremony, conscious that his report to his captain will shape perceptions of your command. Captain Blackwood sends his compliments, sir, the lieutenant begins after saluting. He requests an account of your actions for his dispatch to the Admiral and offers any assistance you might require. Thank you, Lieutenant. Please inform Captain Blackwood that we've taken 2 Spanish vessels, one frigate sent to Gibraltar as prize, the other lost in yesterday's storm, though we saved her crew. We have 60 prisoners aboard and are somewhat short-handed as a result. This communication, formal, precise, and carefully framing your actions in the most favourable light, is part of the political dimension of command. Your reputation and career advancement depend not just on what you accomplish, but on how those accomplishments are perceived by superiors. Cochrane struggled with this aspect of naval service throughout his career. Blunt, outspoken, and impatient with what he considered unnecessary formality, he often alienated the very officers whose support he needed for advancement. His tactical brilliance was matched by political tone deafness that repeatedly cost him opportunities. Captain Blackwood offers to take the prisoners off your hands, sir, the lieutenant continues. He's bound directly for Gibraltar and has space aboard Thunderer. This offer solves one of your immediate problems, the strain on provisions and space created by your Spanish captives, yet it also means surrendering any claim to prize money for the lost brig, since you have no physical evidence of the capture beyond the prisoners themselves. Please thank Captain Blackwood, you respond after brief consideration. We would be grateful to transfer the prisoners. My first lieutenant will arrange the details. The practical benefit outweighs the potential financial loss, another of the constant trade-offs in command decisions. By afternoon, the transfer is complete, with the Spanish sailors and officers now aboard the larger Thunderer. Your ship feels notably less crowded, the atmosphere below decks improving immediately with the reduction in human density. As the ships prepare to part ways, a signal flies from Thunderer, a message from Captain Blackwood. Well done. Admiralty will hear of your success. This simple acknowledgement carries significant weight. In the hierarchical world of naval command, such recognition from a senior officer could influence everything from prize court decisions to future appointments. The captain, who earned the respect of his peers and superiors, had a far better chance of securing desirable commands than one who succeeded in isolation. For Cochrane, such professional respect was often at odds with his contentious relationship with authority. Fellow captains and admirals recognised his extraordinary abilities while frequently finding him personally difficult. Admiral Collingwood, Nelson's successor as commander of the Mediterranean Fleet, wrote of Cochrane, "His enterprise, his intrepidity, and his judgment mark him as an officer of the first class," yet also noted his unfortunate manner that created unnecessary conflicts. With HMS Thunderer disappearing over the horizon, your ship resumes its course toward Gibraltar. The temporary excitement of the encounter fades, replaced by the routine rhythms of life at sea. Yet even these ordinary moments demand your attention as captain. The proper functioning of your vessel depends on thousands of small details, any of which could become critical if neglected. The afternoon watch finds you conducting an inspection of the ship, accompanied by your first lieutenant and boatswain. This regular ritual serves multiple purposes, ensuring the physical condition of your command, demonstrating your attention to detail to the crew, and reinforcing the constant standards expected in His Majesty's Navy. You begin on the upper deck, examining rigging, guns, and the general condition of the vessel. Your eye catches a frayed section of rope on the mainmast shrouds, the standing rigging that supports the mast laterally. "Mr. Perkins," you address the boatswain, "that main shroud needs attention before it weakens further." "Aye, sir, I'll have it replaced next watch." Such minute observations might seem pedantic, but the integrity of a sailing ship depends on countless interconnected components. A single failed rope at the wrong moment could bring down a mast, crippling the vessel and potentially costing lives. The captain who overlooked such details invited disaster. The inspection continues below decks, where conditions become increasingly cramped and airless. The gun deck, where many of your crew sleep in hammocks slung between the cannon, shows signs of the recent action. Scuffs and dents in the wooden deck, a lingering smell of powder smoke despite efforts to air the space. "Have the deck wholly stoned again tomorrow," you order, referring to the practice of scrubbing wooden decks with sandstone blocks to maintain cleanliness, and double the airports opened when weather permits. Ventilation was a constant concern aboard wooden warships. Without artificial air circulation, the lower decks quickly became hot, humid, and foul-smelling from the presence of hundreds of men in confined spaces. Disease spread rapidly in such conditions, potentially devastating a crew more effectively than enemy action. The orlop deck, the lowest full deck of the ship, situated below the waterline, presents an even greater challenge to inspection. Dark even in daylight, requiring lanterns to navigate, it houses the ship's surgeon in his cramped sickbay, along with various stores and functional areas. The surgeon rises from beside a patient as you enter his domain. "Captain," he acknowledges, with the slightly informal manner that medical officers often adopted. The sickbay itself is a sobering sight. Several men lying in crude berths, the implements of early 19th century medicine arrayed on a small table, bone saws, tourniquets, probes, and forceps. "How is Williams?" you inquire about the sailor with the broken arm. "As well as can be expected, sir. The bone was set clean, but he'll need at least 6 weeks before he can return to duty." This injury, minor by the standards of naval warfare, nonetheless represents a significant loss to your crew complement. Every man temporarily or permanently removed from duty increased the burden on those remaining. In battle, such cumulative losses could render a ship ineffective, even if still technically operational. Cochrane understood this dynamic well, often employing tactics that preserved his own crews while maximising damage to enemies. During his command of HMS Speedy, he consistently avoided conventional broadsides that would have exposed his men to overwhelming return fire, instead manoeuvring to strike from positions that minimised his own vulnerability. Your inspection continues into the very bowels of the vessel, the hold where provisions, water casks and ballast occupy the lowest spaces of the ship. Here the air is noticeably fouler, with the smell of bilge water, the stagnant mixture that inevitably collects in a wooden ship's lowest points, adding to the general miasma. "Bilge pumps were operated this morning, sir," your first lieutenant reports, anticipating your concern. 6 inches reported throughout. 6 inches of bilge water is acceptable, a constant reality of wooden ships that leak to some degree at all times. The regular operation of pumps keeps this water from accumulating to dangerous levels, but the smell remains a constant companion of those who venture into a ship's depths. As you climb back to the upper deck, grateful for fresh air and sunlight, you're reminded of another aspect of command, the physical separation between captain and crew. While ordinary sailors spent most of their lives in the cramped, dim conditions below, you enjoy the relative spaciousness and light of the quarterdeck and your cabin. This separation is both practical and symbolic, reinforcing the hierarchical structure that naval operations depend upon. The day continues with another ritual central to shipboard life: punishment. A young seaman has been caught sleeping at his post during the previous night's watch, a serious offence that cannot go unaddressed. As captain, you serve as both judge and, in effect, executioner, determining both guilt and the appropriate penalty. Peterson, you address the nervous sailor brought before you on the quarterdeck. You were found asleep at your post while on watch. Do you deny this charge? No, sir, he responds, knowing that denial would only worsen his situation. You understand the seriousness of this offence? In wartime, a man asleep at his post places the entire ship at risk. Yes, sir, I beg your pardon, sir, won't happen again. Now comes the difficult part of command, determining punishment severe enough to maintain discipline without breaking morale or losing a potentially valuable sailor to excessive harshness. The Articles of War, which govern naval discipline, technically allow for execution for this offence during wartime. However, most captains reserved such extreme measures for the most serious cases of dereliction, mutiny, or desertion. 6 lashes, you pronounce after brief consideration, to be administered now. This is a light punishment by the standards of the era. Some captains might order 2 or 3 dozen lashes for the same offence. Your moderation reflects both the sailor's previously clean record and your own philosophy of command, which values proportionality in discipline. Cochrane himself was known for relatively humane disciplinary practices, at least by the standards of his time. While not hesitating to punish genuine infractions, he typically employed fewer and lighter physical punishments than many of his contemporaries. This approach contributed to the exceptional morale and loyalty of his crews, who performed remarkably under his command. The brief punishment ritual follows naval tradition precisely. The ship's company assembles to witness the proceedings, a deliberate element of naval justice, ensuring that the example serves its deterrent purpose. The boatswain's mate administers the punishment with a cat-o'-nine tails, a multi-tailed whip that leaves distinctive marks on its victims. Even this relatively mild flogging is difficult to watch, the sailor's back quickly showing red wheals from the lash. Yet as captain, you must not only order such punishment, but witness it without visible discomfort. The same authority that grants you the power to command includes the obligation to enforce discipline through means that seem barbaric by modern standards. After the 6th stroke, you give the order, cut him down. The sailor is released and the ship's surgeon briefly examines his back before clearing him to return to duty. Despite the physical pain, the man offers a quick "Thank you, sir," acknowledging what both of you know to be a lenient sentence by contemporary standards. Dismiss the hands, you order, and the assembled crew returns to their duties. The entire proceeding has taken less than 15 minutes, yet its impact on discipline will last far longer. This combination of formalized punishment and relative moderation characterized the most effective naval commanders of the era, unlike the stereotypical Captain Bligh figure of popular imagination. The most successful captains balanced discipline with fairness, understanding that crews perform best when they respected rather than merely feared their commanders. By late afternoon, your ship has made good progress toward Gibraltar, the favourable winds allowing a speed of nearly 8 knots. The routine of naval life continues around you. Watches change, meals are served, regular maintenance proceeds in the constant battle against the sea's corrosive influence. You take the opportunity to review your log and correspondence in your day cabin, the small space adjacent to your sleeping quarters where you conduct most administrative business. The paperwork of command is considerable. Logs must be meticulously maintained, letters drafted to the Admiralty reporting actions and captures, inventories checked, and orders composed for your officers. This administrative burden was yet another aspect of command that often went unrecognised in romantic portrayals of naval life. A captain was not merely a warrior, but also a manager, accountant, diplomat, and clerk, roles requiring literacy, numeracy, and attention to detail beyond the capabilities of many in this era. Cochrane excelled in this area as in so many others, his reports and correspondence displaying the same precise intelligence that marked his tactical decisions. Yet he also chafed against what he considered unnecessary bureaucracy, particularly when it interfered with operational effectiveness or enabled corruption among naval administrators. As evening approaches, you emerge from your paperwork to find the wind freshening again, the sky to windward showing signs of another approaching weather system. The Mediterranean's notoriously changeable conditions demand constant vigilance, especially when navigating near coastlines. "Mr. Harrison," you address your first lieutenant, "will reef topsails before dark. I don't like the look of that sky." "Aye, sir, I'll give the order." This preventative measure, reducing sail area before conditions actually deteriorate, exemplifies the foresight required of successful captains. Better to sacrifice some speed temporarily than risk damage to sails or rigging that might compromise the ship's capability more significantly. The complex operation of reefing the topsails, reducing their effective area by partially furling them against their yards, begins immediately. Sailors scramble aloft with practiced efficiency, balancing on the foot ropes beneath the yards while gathering the heavy canvas and securing it with reef points. From the quarterdeck, you observe the evolution with critical attention. Any mistake in this basic but essential maneuver reflects on both the individual sailors involved and the officers supervising them. The speed and precision with which a crew handles sail serves as perhaps the most visible indicator of a well-commanded vessel. With the ship secured for the night and the evening watch set, you join your officers for dinner in the wardroom, one of the rare occasions when you socialise with your subordinates. This traditional invitation from the officers to their captain helps maintain the delicate balance between authority and collegiality necessary for effective command. The wardroom, the officers' communal dining and living space, offers a notable contrast to the conditions in which ordinary sailors eat. While your crew dines in shifts on the gun deck, sitting on the deck itself or on sea chests with food served in wooden mess bowls, the officers enjoy the relative civilization of a fixed table, individual place settings, and varied menu. "Gentlemen," you acknowledge as you enter, receiving their respectful standing response. The meal that follows is relatively simple by shore standards, but luxurious compared to sailors' fare. Roasted chicken from the ship's livestock rather than salt beef, fresh bread rather than hardtack, wine instead of grog. These differences in diet mark just one of many distinctions between officers and crew, reinforcing the social hierarchy that naval operations depended upon. Conversation during dinner carefully navigates the boundaries between casual and formal, with officers avoiding controversial topics or criticism that might undermine discipline. As captain, you remain somewhat apart even in this setting, included yet ultimately separate by virtue of your authority. Cochrane himself was known for maintaining appropriate distance while still inspiring loyalty among his officers. He commanded respect through evident competence rather than articulation. artificial formality, creating command teams that functioned with exceptional cohesion during crisis or combat. After dinner, you return to the quarterdeck for a final check before retiring. The night has turned as expected, with stronger winds and occasional rain squalls testing your earlier decision to reduce sail. The officer of the watch provides his report, confirming that the ship remains well handled despite deteriorating conditions. Call me if there's any significant change, you instruct. Otherwise, maintain course for Gibraltar. This final order of the day carries an implicit trust that your officers will use proper judgment about what constitutes significant change and when to disturb your rest. The best captains cultivated this discernment in their subordinates, creating a command structure that functioned effectively even when they weren't personally directing every decision. In your cabin once more, your steward assists with the removal of your uniform coat and boots, small comforts that mark your privileged position. Yet even as you prepare for sleep, your mind remains engaged with the countless responsibilities of command. Will the weather worsen further overnight? Is the ship prepared for stormy conditions? How will you manage crew rotation given your reduced numbers after detaching prize crews? What reception awaits you in Gibraltar, where senior officers might approve or condemn your recent actions? This constant mental burden, the inability to truly set aside responsibility even briefly, was perhaps the heaviest aspect of command. Unlike ordinary sailors who could surrender consciousness completely during their off-watch hours, a captain remained perpetually on call, his subconscious attuned to any change in the ship's motion or unusual sound that might indicate developing problems. Cochrane described this state vividly in his memoirs, noting how years of command had conditioned him to wake instantly at any alteration in his ship's movement or the pattern of activity above his cabin. This hyper-awareness served him well in crisis, but extracted a toll in constant vigilance that many found unsustainable over long careers. As you drift towards sleep, the ship's motion provides a reminder of your fundamental circumstances, a wooden vessel carrying hundreds of souls through an unpredictable environment, its safety and success depending ultimately on your judgment. The gentle creaking of timbers, the muffled call of the watch being changed, the distant sound of waves against the hull, these form the lullaby of command, at once comforting in their familiarity and sobering in their implications. This was the paradox of naval command in the age of sail: ultimate authority coupled with ultimate responsibility, the power to order men into battle balanced by accountability for their lives, the romance of the sea tempered by its constant dangers. Few modern individuals, accustomed to shared responsibility and technological safeguards, could adapt to this singular burden. Morning arrives with improved weather and a cry from the masthead that every captain longs to hear: land ho, point bearing south by southwest. The Gibraltar Peninsula has come into view, marking the successful completion of your journey. The massive limestone promontory, known since ancient times as one of the Pillars of Hercules, serves as Britain's gateway to the Mediterranean, a vital naval base that controls access between that sea and the Atlantic Ocean. As your ship approaches, signal flags rise from the fortress atop the rock, acknowledging your vessel's approach and directing you to your anchorage. The harbour below teems with maritime activity, warships flying the white ensign of the Royal Navy, merchant vessels of various nations, and the smaller craft that service this busy port. Entering harbour requires careful ship handling and precise navigation. The narrow waters around Gibraltar, with their shifting currents and limited manoeuvring space, have claimed many vessels whose captains lacked the necessary skill or attention. You personally take the con, issuing detailed orders for sail handling as your ship threads its way toward the designated anchorage. Clew up the courses, you command, ordering the lowest and largest sails to be raised. Stand by to drop anchor. The intricate process of bringing a sailing vessel safely to anchor represents one of the most challenging aspects of seamanship. Too much speed at the critical moment can drag the anchor or snap its cable. Too little can leave the ship vulnerable to currents that might drive it onto nearby vessels or shorelines. With practiced precision, your crew executes the complex sequence, reducing sail progressively, positioning men at the anchor windlass, preparing the heavy anchor itself for deployment. As the ship's forward motion diminishes to the perfect speed, you give the decisive order. Let go! The anchor plunges into the harbour waters with a massive splash, its cable running out through the hawse hole with a thunderous rumble that vibrates through the entire vessel. The ship continues forward briefly from momentum, stretching the cable until the anchor catches on the seabed below. The vessel shivers slightly, then settles into its new stationary position. Make all secure for harbour, you order, initiating the transition from seagoing state to the slightly more relaxed posture appropriate for a friendly port. Sails are furled neatly, running rigging coiled, and the ship's appearance adjusted to meet the high standards expected in a major naval base. Within minutes of your arrival, a harbour boat approaches, bearing a lieutenant from the Port Admiral's staff, your official welcome to Gibraltar and the bearer of whatever news, orders or judgments might await you. Captain, the young officer salutes as he steps aboard. Admiral Thompson sends his compliments and requests your presence at his office at your earliest convenience. He's particularly interested in your report regarding the Spanish frigate. This summons to account for your actions directly to a senior officer represents another aspect of naval command, the constant scrutiny from above. Unlike modern military officers with clear chains of command and detailed operational orders, captains in the age of sail operated with broad discretion but remained subject to judgment after the fact. Thank you, Lieutenant. Please inform the Admiral I shall attend him within the hour. As the messenger departs, you begin preparations for this important meeting. Your appearance and deportment before the Admiral will influence not just his assessment of your recent actions, but potentially your future assignments and career prospects. Mr. Harrison, you address your first lieutenant, you have the ship. I'll be ashore to meet the Admiral, have the ship's books prepared for inspection, and see that the Spanish prisoners are ready for transfer to shore facilities. Your gig, the specialised ship's boat reserved for the captain's use, cuts through Gibraltar Harbour's busy waters, its crew of 6 pulling with practised precision. As you sit in the stern sheets, dressed in your best uniform, you mentally prepare for the meeting ahead. The political dimension of naval command awaits, a realm where victories at sea can be undermined by poor presentation ashore. Landing at the King's Steps, the formal entry point for naval officers, you're received with appropriate honours by the Marine detachment on duty. The brief ceremony reminds you that your position carries not just operational authority, but symbolic importance. You are, in this moment, the physical embodiment of your ship and, by extension, a representative of the Royal Navy itself. This way, sir, directs a midshipman assigned to escort you to the Admiral's office. Admiral Thompson is expecting you. The walk through Gibraltar's narrow streets offers a striking contrast to shipboard life. After weeks at sea, confined to the wooden world of your command, even this small British outpost seems bustling and chaotic. Civilians and military personnel intermingle. Market stalls overflow with fresh produce unavailable at sea, and the sounds and smells of land-based life assault senses accustomed to the more limited environment of a warship. Admiral Thompson's office, situated in a sturdy stone building overlooking the harbour, presents another stark difference from your shipboard accommodations. The space is positively cavernous by naval standards, with high ceilings, large windows, and furnishings that would be impossible to accommodate aboard even the largest vessel. Captain, the Admiral greets you, rising from behind a substantial desk covered with maps and dispatches. Welcome to Gibraltar. I understand you've had quite the eventful cruise. Admiral Thompson represents the next level in the naval hierarchy, an officer who has risen through the same ranks you now occupy, but who has achieved the rarefied status of flag officer. His reception sets the tone for how your recent actions will be judged by the Admiralty. "Thank you, Admiral," you respond with appropriate deference. "We've been fortunate in our encounters with the enemy." What follows is a detailed debriefing, a comprehensive accounting of your ship's activities since leaving port. The Admiral's questions are penetrating, exploring not just what you did, but why you made specific decisions. Did you exceed your orders in pursuing enemy vessels? Were your tactics appropriate to the circumstances? Did you properly balance aggression against preservation of your command? This accountability was a constant in naval service, with captains expected to justify their actions to superiors who might have very different views on proper procedure or acceptable risk. Cochrane frequently found himself defending decisions that, while successful in outcome, violated conventional naval doctrine or exceeded the strict letter of his orders. "Your capture of the Spanish frigate was well executed," the Admiral acknowledges, "though engaging a vessel of superior force was a considerable risk. The loss of your second prize to weather is unfortunate, but understandable given the circumstances." This qualified approval characterizes the typical naval senior officer's approach, acknowledging success while stopping short of unrestrained praise that might encourage excessive boldness in future operations. The Admiral's primary concern, after all, is not just individual victories, but the preservation of valuable warships and trained crews. "Now, as to your future orders," he continues, selecting a sealed document from the pile on his desk. "Once your ship has been provisioned and your crew brought back to full complement, you are to join Captain Blackwood's squadron operating off Cadiz. The Admiralty believes the French may attempt to break their fleet out of Toulon in the coming months, and we're strengthening our forces accordingly." This assignment, joining a squadron under another captain's command, represents both recognition of your abilities and a reminder of your place in the hierarchy. Your independent operations have been successful enough to earn inclusion in a significant strategic deployment, yet you remain subordinate to more senior officers. Cochrane experienced this tension throughout his career, recognized for his exceptional abilities but frequently frustrated by the constraints imposed by superior officers he considered less capable or innovative. During his service under Admiral Gambier at the Battle of Basque Roads in 1809, this conflict reached its peak. Despite creating an opportunity for a devastating British victory through his daring assault with fireships, Cochrane watched in frustrated rage as Gambier failed to follow up the advantage, allowing many French ships to escape. "I've also received notice that your prize has arrived safely," the Admiral adds. "The preliminary assessment by the prize court looks favourable. You and your crew should receive payment within a few months, assuming no complications arise." The prize system, by which captured enemy vessels were sold and the proceeds distributed among the capturing crew, formed a significant part of naval officers' potential income. For successful captains like Cochrane, prize money could far exceed their regular pay, potentially transforming their financial circumstances entirely. "Thank you, Admiral. The men will be pleased to hear it. They performed admirably in the action. Indeed, see that they remain sharp for the coming deployment. Intelligence suggests significant French activity in the Mediterranean. Nelson believes they're preparing for a major fleet action." The mention of Nelson, Britain's greatest naval hero and the commander of the Mediterranean fleet, serves as a reminder of both opportunity and standard. The possibility of participation in a decisive fleet engagement offers the chance for glory and advancement, yet also imposes the expectation of performance worthy of serving under such a legendary figure. With the formal meeting concluded, you take your leave, carrying sealed orders and a clearer understanding of your position in the complex web of naval politics and strategy. The Admiral's reception was positively warm by the standards of senior officers. Your recent successes acknowledged, your decisions generally approved, your future assignment carrying potential for further distinction. Yet, as you return through Gibraltar's winding streets toward the harbour, you're acutely aware of how quickly such approval can evaporate. A single failed engagement, an unfortunate loss, or merely the displeasure of a powerful superior could transform your promising position into professional disgrace. This precariousness defined naval careers in the Age of Sail. Even Cochrane, with his extraordinary record of victories, found himself vulnerable to the shifting winds of Admiralty politics. His outspoken criticism of corruption and inefficiency made powerful enemies, while his unconventional tactics sometimes alienated more traditional senior officers. Back at the harbour, you're met by your first lieutenant, who has come ashore with a boat to report developments in your absence. "All well with the Admiral, sir?" he inquires, the question carrying more significance than its casual phrasing might suggest. "Well enough. We're to join Blackwood off Cadiz once we've replenished and brought our crew up to strength. What's our status?" "Water casks are being filled now, sir. The victualling office has promised fresh provisions by tomorrow morning. We've received 12 new hands from the receiving ship, mostly experienced men from vessels paying off. The purser is completing the paperwork for our stores now." The logistics of maintaining a warship formed a significant part of a captain's responsibilities. Without adequate provisions, fresh water, and properly trained crew, the most powerful vessel became useless, a floating hulk incapable of executing its mission. Cochrane paid particular attention to these practical aspects of command, understanding that strategic success depended on mundane factors like proper provisioning and crew composition. During his command of HMS Pallas, he famously captured a Spanish treasure ship carrying thousands of dollars in coin, wealth that allowed him to ensure his vessel was properly supplied even when official channels proved inadequate. "And the prisoners?" you inquire, mindful of your responsibility for the Spanish sailors captured in your recent engagements. "Transferred to the prison hulk as ordered, sir. Their officers have been paroled ashore under supervision. The Spanish captain asked me to convey his thanks for your courtesy during the action." This professional respect between opposing officers reflected the curious duality of naval warfare in the era. Fierce combat followed by civilized treatment of prisoners according to established codes of conduct. Captured officers could expect parole, allowing them relative freedom within specified boundaries, based on their word of honor not to escape. Very good. I'll be dining aboard tonight. Have the surgeon and the Marine Lieutenant join us. We need to discuss the new deployment. This casual invitation demonstrates another aspect of command, the selective use of social occasions to build relationships with key officers and conduct business in a less formal setting. The captain, who balanced appropriate distance with occasional accessibility, generally achieved better results than those who remained completely aloof or inappropriately familiar. The next days pass in a flurry of activity as your ship prepares for its new assignment. Fresh provisions come aboard, sides of beef, live chickens and pigs, sacks of vegetables and fruit that will prevent scurvy during the coming cruise. Water casks are filled with clean water from Gibraltar's springs, replacing the stagnant, algae-filled liquid that remained from your previous voyage. New crew members must be integrated into the ship's company, their abilities assessed, their assignments determined, their places in the watch rotation established. Some are experienced sailors who will strengthen your crew, others are landsmen with little nautical knowledge, allocated to your vessel by the port admiral to make up required numbers. The physical vessel itself requires attention after weeks of hard service. Rigging has stretched and chafed, needing adjustment and repair. The hull, constantly working in heavy seas, has developed leaks that carpenters must locate and seal. Canvas sails, weathered by sun and salt, require patching or replacement. As captain, you oversee this complex restoration process, ensuring that your command will be ready for the challenges ahead. Your officers handle specific aspects according to their responsibilities: the boatswain managing rigging repairs, the sailing master supervising navigation equipment, the gunner attending to weapons and ammunition, the purser accounting for provisions and supplies. This delegation represents yet another skill essential to effective command. The captain, who attempted to personally direct every detail, would quickly be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of tasks involved in preparing a warship for sea. Successful commanders like Cochrane understood the importance of developing capable, trustworthy subordinates who could manage their departments with minimal supervision. A welcome interruption to these preparations comes in the form of the prize court's preliminary ruling. Your capture of the Spanish frigate has been deemed valid, with an estimated value that will provide significant payment to you and your crew once the final adjudication is complete. The distribution of this money follows strict formulas established by the Admiralty. As captain, you'll receive 1/4 of the total, a substantial sum that reflects your ultimate responsibility for the capture. Your officers will share another 1/4 divided according to rank, while the final half is distributed among the ordinary seamen and marines. For a valuable prize like a Spanish frigate, these amounts could transform lives. A successful captain might earn more from a single capture than from years of regular pay. Ordinary sailors whose wages were meagre and often in arrears might receive sums equivalent to several years' income from a particularly valuable prize. Cochrane's early career demonstrates the financial impact of this system. His audacious captures while commanding HMS Speedy earned him the equivalent of millions in modern currency, establishing his personal fortune and providing significant wealth to his crew. This financial incentive undoubtedly contributed to the exceptional performance of ships under prize-taking captains. Every man aboard understood that his personal prosperity depended on successful action against enemy vessels. On the evening before your scheduled departure, you host a formal dinner in your cabin for your officers, a tradition marking the beginning of a significant deployment. The small table is set with your best silver and china, brought aboard at your personal expense. Your steward has worked with the cook to prepare a meal far superior to standard naval fare, supplemented by wines from your private stores. Gentlemen, you propose a toast as the meal concludes, to successful hunting off caddies. The assembled officers, your first and second lieutenants, the ship's surgeon, the marine officer, and the master, raise their glasses in response. This moment of conviviality serves multiple purposes, building esprit de corps among your command team, acknowledging their status as gentlemen as well as officers, and establishing the tone for the coming operational period. Cochrane understood the importance of such gestures in maintaining morale among his officers, though he was less formal than many captains of his era. His leadership style emphasized professional respect rather than social deference, creating a command climate where initiative and intelligence were valued above strict adherence to hierarchy. Morning brings final preparations for departure. The anchor watch has been reinforced with additional hands for the complex evolution of weighing anchor and making sail from a crowded harbour. The pilot, a local mariner with detailed knowledge of Gibraltar's waters, has come aboard to guide your initial departure through the tricky currents around the rock. "All hands to weigh anchor," bellows the boatswain at your order, his call echoed by his mates throughout the ship. The organised chaos that follows demonstrates the extraordinary coordination required to operate a sailing warship effectively. Men swarm up the ratlines to prepare the furled sails for deployment. Others man the capstan, the massive winch that will haul up the heavy anchor. Marines take positions as hull sentries, ensuring no unauthorized boats approach during this vulnerable transition from stationary to mobile state. Your place during this evolution is the quarterdeck, where you can observe all aspects of the operation while issuing necessary orders. The actual direction of specific tasks falls to your officers, the first lieutenant supervising the deck, the sailing master attending to course and wind conditions, the boatswain managing the complex interaction of hundreds of control lines. "Anchors aweigh, sir," comes the report from forward as the massive iron hook breaks free from the harbour bottom. "Make sail," you order, initiating the carefully choreographed sequence of unfurling canvas to catch the morning breeze. First the topsails, then courses, followed by topgallants as the ship gathers momentum and steering control. The feeling of a ship coming alive beneath your feet, transitioning from static object to dynamic vessel, remains one of the most profound experiences of command. Modern captains, even of the largest vessels, can never fully appreciate this sensation unique to sailing ships, where hundreds of men acting in perfect coordination harness the invisible power of wind through acres of canvas. As Gibraltar recedes behind you, your thoughts turn to the deployment ahead. Joining Blackwood's squadron means operating as part of a larger force, a different challenge from the independent cruising you've recently completed. Your tactical decisions will be constrained by the squadron commander's signals and overall strategy, requiring a different approach to command. Cochrane sometimes struggled with this aspect of naval service, his independent nature and tactical creativity chafing under the limitations imposed by squadron operations. During the Battle of Basque Roads, his frustration with Admiral Gambier's cautious approach led him to act with increasing independence, ultimately creating significant professional consequences despite the objective success of his actions. By midday, your ship is clear of the Strait of Gibraltar, the Atlantic opening before you as you set course for the Spanish coast and your rendezvous with Blackwood's squadron. The routine of sea service resumes. Watches set, lookouts posted, gun crews exercising their weapons, the thousand daily tasks that maintain a wooden warship in fighting condition. As you stand on the quarterdeck, surveying your command cutting through moderate seas under a press of canvas, you embody the unique position of a naval captain in the age of sail, absolute authority within your wooden world, yet ultimately accountable to distant superiors. Master of wind and wave through skill and experience, yet always vulnerable to their unpredictable power. Leader of hundreds of men whose lives depend on your judgment, yet fundamentally isolated by the nature of command itself. This paradoxical existence, powerful yet constrained, authoritative yet accountable, central yet isolated, defined the captains who guided Britain's wooden walls through the tumultuous wars against revolutionary and Napoleonic France. The most successful, like Cochrane, navigated not just the physical seas but these complex contradictions of command. What made Cochrane exceptional, even among the remarkably capable captains of his era, was his unique combination of tactical brilliance, technical understanding, and moral courage. When commanding the tiny HMS Speedy against the vastly superior El Gamo, he demonstrated not just daring but innovative problem-solving, positioning his vessel where the Spanish guns couldn't depress enough to hit her, using psychological warfare to undermine enemy morale, turning apparent disadvantage into decisive victory. Throughout his career, from the Mediterranean to South America and Greece, Cochrane consistently achieved results that seemed impossible given his resources. His capture of the fortress of Valdivia in Chile with a minuscule force, his devastating use of fire ships at Basque Roads, his systematic dismantling of Spanish naval power during Brazil's War of Independence, all showcased a mind that transcended conventional military thinking. Yet his greatness came at a cost. The same independent spirit and moral courage that enabled his battlefield successes made him a difficult subordinate and a dangerous political enemy. His outspoken criticism of corruption in naval administration and prize courts earned him powerful adversaries. His willingness to employ unconventional tactics alienated more traditional officers. His refusal to accept limitations imposed by less competent superiors repeatedly damaged his career prospects. The 1814 stock exchange fraud case that resulted in his imprisonment and temporary dismissal from the Royal Navy remains controversial to this day. While officially convicted of participating in market manipulation, many historians believe Cochrane was framed by political enemies who recognised the opportunity to eliminate a dangerous reformer. His subsequent vindication and reinstatement came too late to restore his position in the British naval establishment, leading to his extraordinary second career, commanding the navies of Chile, Brazil and Greece in their independence struggles. In these foreign services, Cochrane found the operational freedom his nature demanded, achieving results that further confirmed his exceptional abilities while reinforcing his reputation for difficult relations with authority. The pattern established in his Royal Navy service continued. Brilliant tactical success accompanied by political conflicts that limited his long-term effectiveness. After returning to Britain, Cochrane's later years brought a measure of vindication. Reinstated in the Royal Navy with his rank and honours restored, he continued his technical innovations, becoming an important advocate for steam propulsion and modern naval design. His death in 1860 at age 85 marked the passing of one of the last great commanders from the age of sail. What lessons might we draw from Cochrane's extraordinary career and the demands of naval command in his era? Perhaps most significantly, the recognition that effective leadership requires a complex balance of seemingly contradictory qualities, the courage to take bold action, yet the wisdom to recognize limitations, the confidence to trust one's judgment, yet the humility to acknowledge errors, the strength to maintain authority, yet the flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances. Few individuals in any era possess this balance naturally. The great captains of the Age of Sail, Nelson, Cochrane, Pellew and their peers, developed these qualities through experience, often learning harsh lessons from early mistakes. Their success came not from absence of error, but from the capacity to learn and grow from each challenge encountered. For modern individuals contemplating whether they could function as naval captains in the 1800s, the honest answer for most would be no, not from lack of courage or intelligence, but from unfamiliarity with the specific skills and mindset required. The ability to navigate by stars and dead reckoning, to interpret wind patterns from subtle changes in wave behavior, to diagnose and address problems in complex sailing rigs, to maintain discipline through a combination of formal authority and personal example. These capabilities cannot be acquired quickly or easily. Beyond these technical skills lies the psychological adjustment to command in isolation, making life or death decisions without consultation or technological support, bearing full responsibility for success or failure without the distributed accountability of modern organizations. Few contemporary individuals have experienced anything approaching this burden of solitary responsibility. The wooden ships that Cochrane and his contemporaries commanded have long since disappeared, replaced by vessels of steel powered by engines rather than wind. The specific skills they employed have become historical curiosities rather than practical necessities. Yet the fundamental qualities that made them effective, courage, judgment, adaptability, and moral fortitude, remain essential to leadership in any era. Perhaps this explains our continued fascination with the Age of Sail and its legendary commanders. In studying figures like Cochrane, we glimpse not just an exciting historical period, but timeless principles of leadership under pressure. Their struggles and triumphs separated from us by centuries nevertheless speak to enduring human challenges: how to make decisions with incomplete information, how to balance risk against opportunity, how to lead others effectively while remaining true to one's principles. As we leave our hypothetical captain sailing toward his rendezvous with Blackwood's squadron, we might reflect on how thoroughly the age of wooden ships and iron men has passed. Yet the qualities that defined great captains, what Cochrane called the true spirit of enterprise, remain as valuable and rare today as they were when Britain's survival depended on the judgment of men who commanded her wooden walls against seemingly impossible odds. Would you have made a successful captain in the Royal Navy of the 1800s? Almost certainly not. The specific blend of technical expertise, physical hardiness, psychological resilience, and social understanding required cannot be acquired without years of immersion in that vanished world. But in contemplating the challenges these remarkable individuals faced and overcome, we might discover insights about leadership, responsibility, and human potential that transcend their distant era and speak directly to our own.